Hello everyone, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I am here to talk a little bit more about the television series Lost. Almost 2 months ago, I wrote what I like to think was a pretty scathing critique on Lost. And at the time, it had been quite some time since I had watched the show, but what I remembered very vividly from my experiences was that I hated it, and I could not understand why anyone liked this dang thing. Well, after going through the process of making that video, I got curious. The kind of curious like when you see a bear trap, and you can't tell if it's set or not, and you have to check even if it means it might chew your foot off. That kind of curious. I started watching the show once again from the beginning, and this time I was able to finish it all the way through. And my feelings on the show have changed somewhat. I still don't think it's as fantastic as defenders of the show seem to think, but I have to say, if I met someone who hated it as much as I did 2 months ago, I don't think I would agree with them. Upon rewatching the show, many of the things I hated when I made my video still stand, and some of them I find I was maybe mistaken about, and I even found some new things to hate. So before I go any further, let me, to the best of my ability, address some of the things I said in my video that I made before I watched the whole series. I had mentioned that the character of Jack felt largely inconsequential to the series. Originally, the plan was for this character to be played by some big-name actor and die in the pilot episode. Then Kate would become the leader of the plane crash survivors. There's still some evidence of this plan in the show that we got, like when Sawyer gives Kate the air marshal's badge and tells her that she can have it since she's the new sheriff in town. Before watching this series through again, I went so far as to say that Jack was a terrible human being. Well, I still maintain that Jack's character felt kinda pointless, but I do regret saying that he was a terrible human being. I feel like the things Jack did, for the most part, are representative of what many civilized people would do under the pressures of living on the island. So having said that, I do think that for most of Season 1, he has very little personality beyond leader guy. It seems like the whole idea of making the show be a battle of faith versus reason didn't even come around until Season 2, which is also around the time when Jack starts to develop a bit of a personality. I still think that the show would have been a little stronger if Kate had become the leader and Jack died in the pilot. Kate really didn't serve much of a purpose at all in this show. I said in my previous video that her only purpose was to be a tease for Sawyer and Jack. And well, yeah, that's basically it. Even in the final season, we're still getting knowing looks from Kate for Jack and Sawyer. If we had never had a Jack, then everything he ever did in this show, arguing with John Locke about pushing the button, convincing the Oceanic Six that they have to go back, all of that stuff could have been given to Kate, and she would have felt much more like she had a reason to be on the show. But that is neither here nor there. No more I can really say about this. One character I did come to hate with a great burning passion when I watched through the series was John Locke. And with my complaints of Locke come a general complaint about this entire series. Locke was perpetually the one character who I had nothing but negative things to say about, starting at about the halfway point of Season 1. For the first several episodes, Locke was often the mysterious, wise mentor figure for many of the characters on the island. Charlie, Boone, Jack, he gave them all cryptic advice that helped them at certain points early on. He was like the Yoda of the island. You don't want to necessarily see him become heavily involved in the actual adventures, but you like him when he's in the background giving wise advice to the characters who are getting in the thick of things. Actually, comparing him to Yoda is pretty spot on for me anyway, especially since, even before I started hating him with any regularity, I never did like the episodes where Locke was the focus and we got to see his flashbacks. I would just as soon Locke be the Hudson to Jack's Goliath, Gargoyle's Goliath, not biblical Goliath, but that is apparently not what the creators of the show wanted to do with the character. For me, as soon as Locke found the hatch, everything went downhill. For no given reason, Locke seems to think that all of the air quotes answers are in the hatch. We have no idea what he means by this, and instead of just communicating clearly and concisely with everyone else, he keeps it all to himself for some bullcrap reason of they wouldn't understand. And this brings me to my general complaint about the whole series. When Sawyer kills a polar bear, why in blue blazes would this not be something that Kate and Charlie tell everyone? When the crash survivors start pushing the button, why does Jack think the hatch has to be kept a secret from everyone? Why does he think nobody should know about Ben Linus being held prisoner in the hatch? I think this series would have been about 2 seasons shorter if everyone on this dang island was just brutally honest with each other. Jack, you don't understand. This island is special. No, it's not, Locke. You're a fool. Well, I was crippled before I came here, and now I'm not. It's kind of a special place. Oh, well, that makes sense. Thank you for telling me that, John. And you might say that John having to explain everything very specifically might fly in the face of the whole reason versus faith thing. If you have to have evidence to believe something, then you don't really have faith at all. And yeah, this would have kind of defeated the theme of the show. But characters in the story don't know the theme of the show. There is not a single blasted character reason why John would not tell everyone that the island cured him or that he found a hatch. In a lot of ways, the dynamic between Jack and John reminds me a great deal of the dynamic between Mulder and Scully in the X-Files TV series, especially from the first season. That whole show was about two FBI agents investigating paranormal cases. Mulder believed that ghosts and goblins existed, but he never did have the proof to say, look, this is what's going on. So even though we knew he was right, he always came out looking like an idiot. Scully, meanwhile, didn't believe in aliens or anything, and even though we know she's wrong, she is always able to support why she thinks what she does, and so she comes off looking like the smart one of the two. Now let's talk about Jack and John. We know that the island is special. John knows that the island is special. But because all he ever manages to tell anyone is, you just have to trust me, he comes off sounding like the biggest idiot in the entire world. Jack, meanwhile, is using his brain. Even though we know he's wrong, it's really hard for me to accept that when he's actually thinking rationally. And speaking of Jack thinking rationally, that has to come to an end, right? Like I said, this whole show is about faith, essentially. Jack begins the series as a non-believer. He believes in what he can see, and the idea that an island can be special or that a person can have a destiny is all mumbo-jumbo to him. So the idea is that over the course of the series, he will go through a slow and gradual change where, by the end of the show, he now believes and he has come to the end of his character arc. Except, that's not what happens. Starting in Season 4, instead of flashbacks showing more or less pointless backstory for the main characters, we start getting flash forwards showing us that 6 people on the island made it back home. This was kinda neat because it made us wonder throughout all of Season 4 who was going to make it off the island and what reason they would have for leaving everyone else on the island. But in the first flash forward at the beginning of Season 4, Jack is suddenly saying that they never should have left the island. We never really get a clear reason why he thinks this, beyond his life going to Hades in a handbasket and thinking that if he can go back to bossing people around and eating mangoes for free and not having to pay taxes, then everything will be hunky-dory. This is most definitely not how a character arc should happen. It should be a slow and organic thing. It should not feel like the writers are suddenly writing a different character. And sure, things change in the span of 3 years, and people change as well. But this does not change the fact that Jack's big character moment for this series essentially happens off-screen. And this isn't the last time that Jack's character changes drastically for no real reason at all. In the course of Season 4, in the air quotes present day, we see him saying that they have to leave the island. In the flash forwards, he wants to go back. Then, I poo you not, 1 season later he thinks that none of them ever should have come to the island in the first place. Then, 1 more season later, he's back to thinking that they should never leave. But since he's not an anus like John Locke, he at least lets everyone leave if they want to. And here's the thing. I get that if you're going to have someone detonate a hydrogen bomb and try to set right what once went wrong, hoping that each leap will be the leap home, then it makes the most sense that your main character would be the one to do it. But the problem is that he showed no signs of building up to this decision. Daniel Faraday told him his plan, died, and then Jack said, okay, sounds good enough for me, let's do it. This is also an example of characters doing things simply because the writers mapped out a rough story for the entire series, along with specific turning points for each season. And so, even when it makes no kind of sense at all for a human being to do the things that some of these characters do them they do, because the writers need the story to progress in the way that they planned it. And that's the perfect segue for me to talk about the hatch for a little bit. When we first get to see the inside of the hatch, Desmond is inside. He's been in there for 3 years pushing a button. He claims he doesn't know what will happen if he stops pressing it. But then he leaves the island, leaving the button pushing to the plane crash survivors. Then he comes back near the end of the season, and this time we find out that he is the reason the plane crashed. He was out killing his partner who helped him push the button, and he wasn't at the button to press it, and the island released an electromagnetic pulse that crashed the plane. While Desmond didn't know that a plane crashed, he most certainly knew that the island started shaking and that it was because he did not press the dang button. So why, 3 months later, when the plane crash survivors are asking him what happens if you don't press the button, does he say that he doesn't know? Why doesn't he tell them about the failsafe key, which literally makes the entire season pointless? Again, because the people behind the show need the story to happen in the way that they planned it, and characters acting logically and doing things that make sense would alter the course of the story that they mapped out. I said in the previous video that Season 2 is the worst, and it was the reason that I stopped watching the show the first time through. And it is still the worst. Watching the whole series does not change that. There are some other things in my video that I mentioned that I still agree with. For instance, let's talk about Jacob, his brother, and the others. I said before that the whole show should have been about Jacob and his brother having a war from the beginning, instead of us only hearing vague whispers of Jacob's name starting in Season 3 and not even getting to see him until the very end of Season 5. I see no reason why this show could not have done this from the beginning, especially since, for the first 2 seasons, not a whole lot happens. They crash, we get to know some of them, they explore 1/10 of the island, they find the hatch. That's about what happens in the first 2 seasons. The big problem with introducing the crux of the series so late in the series is that it didn't really feel like the people behind the show had any clue what they were doing. And I've said before that they did not know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But when you wait 5 years to introduce characters who really are central to the entire series and everything that went on in the series, that is not going to look good. In fact, it looks like the show was one thing, vague mysteries about these characters whose lives are all connected, when in actuality it was apparently something entirely different. Centuries-long family feud with magical elements thrown in for good measure. But I've also got issues with the characters, period. As near as I can tell, Jacob is supposed to be a metaphor for Jesus or God, and the smoke monster is supposed to be a metaphor for the devil, sorta along the lines of the Chronicles of Narnia, where you can enjoy the story on one level, but you can also draw parallels to biblical accounts and such. Now, whether you can actually enjoy the story of Lost is up for debate, but this show is clearly trying to play with the same ideas. Even if you don't like religion or religious metaphors, this show clearly wants us to think that Jacob is the good guy. But Jacob is the guy who is in charge of the others. And the others, as I mentioned in my previous video, they also want us to think that they are the good guys. But over the course of the show, they lie, kill, kidnap, torture, all for some vague loyalty to Jacob. And the only reason Jacob can give for not having a more active role in the work of this servants is, why should I interfere? Well, maybe you're an idiot, Jacob. This guy, I might remind you, claims that he wants his replacements to guard the island to have a choice to do so, which Jacob did not have. Yet, we're led to believe that Jacob somehow brought the plane to the island, even though we were told specifically that Desmond is responsible for crashing the plane. So Jacob, our alleged good guy, is responsible for ruining the life of something like 100 people, also that this island can have a new guardian? At which point did any of these guys have a choice? Was it when your servants were playing mental warfare with them so that they couldn't leave the island? Is that when they had a choice? If you wanted a blasted replacement, why not let Richard do it, or Ben, or any of your willing servants? Why are these people who you refuse to reveal yourself to so special? So I think it's safe to say that Jacob is not a good guy. Neither are the others. It's like Lopetus said when Alana and her stupid friends kept saying that they were good. Someone who tries so hard to convince people that they are good usually aren't. So maybe this show wants it to be like, there are no good guys, no bad guys, just shades of gray. That makes sense considering that some of our air quotes good guys have pretty sordid pasts. But when you look at the smoke monster, he is pretty much evil. Even at the beginning of Season 6, we still don't know his motivations at all, really. But we eventually get an, all I want to do is leave the island, and you're thinking, oh okay, that's not too bad. But then, for absolutely no discernible reason at all, he decides that he is also going to sink the island as well, and that apparently the whole world will go boom or something when that happens. I think the show would have been much better off if it had gone one of two directions. One, the whole show is really a battle of good versus evil. Smoke Monster is actually 100% evil and he must be stopped, and Jacob is the antithesis to the Smoke Monster, and all of the people on the island pick sides and go to war with each other, since the two brothers can't do anything directly to each other. Or, if that's not ambiguous enough for you, then slide both of the brothers toward each other on the scale of good and evil. Make Jacob more or less kinda good, but very clearly flawed and not opposed to allowing evil to be done if it is in service of him. And make the Smoke Monster more or less kinda bad, but with understandable motivations and a sympathetic backstory that makes us kinda almost root for him, despite him being more bad than we would like. What the show did was try to have its cake and eat it too. It went with the Smoke Monster being 100% evil, with a little bit of a sympathetic backstory, and then Jacob being the morally gray guy who everyone pretends is this good savior of all of humanity. Many of the complaints I have here are pretty broad, I understand that. There were many things about this show that I did not like, and if I wanted to get right down to the nitpicks, I could spend another 10 minutes asking questions that, in my humble, would poke some holes in the overall show. This is almost an instance where I think I would be better off reviewing this series episode by episode so that I could ask questions as they come to me in each episode. But I don't want to spend the next decade of my life analyzing and watching this show, so I'm okay with just putting my broad thoughts out there. I would like to know what you guys think of Lost. Is it as bad as I used to think, or is it better than what I think now? Let me know in the comments below, or make a video response if you have much to say. I do hope that this video was enjoyable and informative for you folks. If it wasn't, keep in mind that I did spend about 2 weeks on and off trying to get my thoughts down in such a way where I did not feel like I was forgetting stuff. And I'm sure I did forget plenty of stuff at one time I wanted to say. But I don't want this to be a 9-hour video, so I will be leaving a lot of that stuff out of this video. In any case, this is about all I have to say. So this will be the final time I'll be talking about Lost on this channel in any great detail, I believe. So I will see you guys tomorrow with some other kind of video. Until then, have a good day.